completed a 4-month inquiry-based project from Indiana University. In 2018, the Rotary Club of Madras East conferred the Dronacharya Award on him for his contributions to theatre education. In 2019, he won the Hindu Playwright Award for his script Sordid. Most recently, he was chosen as a fellow for the Arts for Good Fellowship 2019 organization by Singapore International Foundation. I very warmly welcome you to today's session, sir. Instructions for the participants: please mute your audio and video. Avoid refrain yourselves from sending personal messages or any other unrelated conversations in the chat box. Thank you.
We can start now, sir.
Yeah. Artist, good morning to everyone, and I'm very happy to be a part of this webinar where we are discussing various dimensions of the application of theater and theater techniques. I am basically an actor, and like any other theater actor, when we are trying to eke out our livelihood, one of the things which we do is to teach. Some people like to say that, those who can't act become teachers, but that I don't think is a truth at all. Sometimes those who can act and understand the fundamentals of acting and what it actually does to the human physiology and psychology end up being teachers. So as a teacher, whenever I have gone into my classroom, I have been very preoccupied with one thing. I have always noticed that students, not at all times, seem to be very open about what they are doing. There seems to be a huge baggage which can consist of mistreated emotions. Sometimes it is about a very conditioned outlook to life in terms of what they are doing. And even when they are as young as 5th class or 6th class, and when we ask them to perform, we see that there is a lot more of representation on their part in terms of how they have been taught what is it to be happy, what it is to be sad, what it is to be angry, rather than them allowing their honest, organic, true emotions to come out. So as a facilitator, a teacher, and most importantly a stage actor, I've always asked this question: why children so young seem to be so nervous, so anxious, so sometimes they're carrying the aftermath of some sort of trauma. Not saying that adults don't have it, but being a teacher of young students, I have noticed this predominantly in children. And the question was, is there a possibility that we can target this issue? End of the day, I'm only a theater facilitator. My education is only in drama. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a counselor. So without us kind of transgressing those very thin lines, is it possible for a theater facilitator to offer a sort of safe space in which children can kind of become self-healers? Self-healers because the human body has this embedded in their DNA that we can heal ourselves. Sometimes when the trauma is very powerful, it is sometimes very devastating. We are not able to do so, and at such a moment, we require what is known as intervention. But most of the time in a young age, this sort of an issue goes unnoticed, forgets treatment for it. So as a teacher, rather than being preoccupied about putting up a play, rather than being preoccupied about, teaching literature or working on speech and diction, etc., is it possible for me to make my theater class a space where children can actually embark on a journey where they not only are the people being treated, but they are the doctors themselves? So in psychological terms, they become both the analysts and the analysms. Is there a process by which this can be done, was a question. So I looked at myself. Where and when am I most happy? And the answer was very simple. and I think every actor right now on this forum will agree with me, it always was when I was on stage. When I was acting, when I was trying to create the illusion of a character, when I was on stage, I found myself to be the happiest. So next question was, what is this happiness about? The answer was, this happiness was embarking from a state of feeling free. There being no quest on my part to seek any sort of validation from anyone around me. It was a quest on my part to be completely liberated. So what was offering this liberation? What was causing me to feel this kind of a freedom on stage? The answer was that all my responses on stage were to imaginary stimulus. They were not to real stimulus. When faced with real stimulus, immediately there comes with it the anxiety of seeking validation, judgment, morals and ethics. Am I right or wrong? What have I been taught in terms of what is correct and what is not correct? But when my stimulus becomes imaginary, I become free to explore an absolute plethora of emotive content. I become free to explore so many different states of being without having to censure myself. The biggest detriment to humans in today's time, I believe, is this concept of self-censorship, by which we tell ourselves what is right, what is wrong. Yes, I agree completely that many of them are required in order for us to function as a society. So the question which comes up right now is, what is that point in the history of evolution that we decided to become a society? Before becoming a society, how were we? Usually when we are talking to elders about this thing, we are told that, now we are civilized. Earlier we were all, the Hindi word for it is jungly. We were all katans. We were wild is what they say. But that is wrong. Much before we constructed ourselves into social beings, much before we constructed ourselves into these institutions of society, etc., we lived in what were known as clusters. This is a story some of you might be knowing, but worth repeating once more. We were living in what is known as clusters. So what kept us together was basically the fact that we needed to be together in order to provide possibly security to each other. We needed to be together in order to hunt animals and gather food for our sustenance. We needed to be together in order to reproduce. So the entire cluster did not have any sort of hierarchy in it. It did not have any sort of caste, color, gender-based. None of these issues were there because we were all together only attempting to survive by gathering and hunting food. And all the children which belonged to this sort of a cluster, they belonged to the entire group. The mother of the child was always known. The father was never known. Children belonged to the society. Hence, there was always equal education, equal training, equal nourishment, equal love. Everything was in a state of absolute bliss. Yes, we could get hunted by a wild animal and die, just like today you can get hit by a car while crossing Mount Road and die. But apart from that, we did not have any concepts of hierarchy, property. Hence, there was no question of possessiveness. There was no question of seeking some sort of validation. The concepts of nervousness, anxiety, tension, all this more or less did not exist. So where did they come up from? They started coming in from the time we possibly discovered agriculture. The point at which we realized that now we don't need to endanger our life in order to get our food, but we can grow food which can sustain us for months together. I will not go into too much of anthropological discussion right now, but what we need to understand is along with this agriculture came up the social institutions of something like marriage, the other sort of institutions which are very important for us now to function as a closed unit. So just like I told you right now, till yesterday, the children belonged to the society. The mother of the child was known, the father was not known. So any man, any woman could get together for the purpose of reproduction. There was absolutely no sort of morals, ethics, etc. attached to it. But now suddenly, with agriculture, we brought in the institution of marriage and said one woman is allowed only one man. Now, why would any woman agree to this, new kind of a rule? This is quite akin to, for example, if the government were to suddenly sit up and say that, we are going to bring in these refugees who have got standard in some place in India, and each family has to take one refugee and keep them in their home from tomorrow. They will have equal rights to everything in your house. We will not agree to it because we have developed this sense of, possessiveness. This is mine, my family, my house, etc. Now, same way, a brand new rule which came up to say suddenly that you now will belong, you now can be with only one man and no one else in order to facilitate the concept of agriculture. This was not to be accepted. So how does this acceptance now be injected into a certain segment of society? By now, the cluster had discovered theater. They already knew music. They knew music because they could hear, the wind whistling through the bamboo reeds, and they have heard it. They know about dance because they have seen the mating rituals of animals and birds. But now they discovered theater because of hunting, wherein people who had gone for an hunt used to, get up and recreate how they had hunted the animal for the benefit of those who were not able to come for the hunt. So we had already discovered that there are people who are doing an action, there are people who are watching that action, and hence when someone watches something in a particular place, that becomes theater. As you might be aware, the word theater comes from the Greek word theatron, which basically means to see. So since they knew that theater as a tool works in order to keep the community together, they made use of this same craft also to introduce new laws and edicts. So they started creating stories to tell women that up there in the heavens, there is a person who looks like me, the man. There is a person who looks like you, the woman. They both are very happy together. But one day, another man was walking through that place. This woman turned to look at that man, and immediately she was burned to ashes. So as a woman, you are not supposed to look at any other man. Stories started to reiterate the kind of rules and regulations that we wanted to bring into society. In fact, stories and theaters went ahead also to be the first source by which laws, edicts, rules, etc. were fed into society. Even today we know about stories with morals, we know stories with messages. What are these stories for? In order to let society know, this is the way you will behave. If you don't behave this way, you are going to face repercussions. So what happened through the advent of civilization is that we created a society based on narratives in order to follow rules, regulations, etc. to keep ourselves together. But by doing that, we very majorly negated 4 very important cognitive skills of human beings which allowed us to live, exist, and survive when we were food gatherers and food hunters. These 4 skills being those of intuitiveness, impulsiveness, instinctiveness, and imagination. These were 4 very important skills which had allowed us to survive in the forest. And now, suddenly, because of conditioning, because of rules, laws, ethics, morality, sin, good, bad, etc., we suddenly face a situation where these 4 cognitive skills, which we had taken thousands and thousands of years to develop, were suddenly being negated. Once this negation started, I personally believe the evolution of human beings also reached a plateau. It did not go beyond that. So now what happens is, in today's time, when we are encountering people who have issues of anxiety, who have issues of nervousness, maybe depression, or some severe trauma, and I'm not talking about that which is visible to us objectively, like for example, we look at a war camp, or we look at children who have undergone severe violence in their lives, and now they are placed in a special safe place which is objectively visible to us. I am talking about issues which are invisible. I am talking about people who go about in their lives enjoying festivals, smiling, laughing. They are all around us, but within them, they carry with them this aftermath of some trauma which leads them to becoming what we sometimes call as either antisocial elements, or say they are difficult people, or people who are always brooding. And this is something I observed in my classrooms with children. So now I was thinking about, is there a possibility that this liberation, this freedom, liberation, we all know what it means. It means basically to be free to express ourselves. And the biggest problem is that we don't allow children to express themselves. We keep telling them, don't talk like this, don't laugh like that, don't sit like this, don't wear clothes like this, don't do this, don't do that, set a time to do everything. We destroy their organic behavior. And we carry this forward in our lives as adults also. So, I mean, sometimes actors have this joke. They say that throughout life, we are told to keep everything in. And one day we go to acting school and we are told, bring everything out. It's a very difficult process for actors to, negate so much of development training. So now, is there a possibility that this liberation, which is a liberation of the thought process, which is an organic liberation of allowing whatever you feel to be expressed by you. Basically, to be put in very simple words, your ability to say no when you want to say no, and your ability to say yes when you want to say yes. Can I empower my students with this basic power, that they are able to say no when they want to say no? They are able to say yes when they want to say yes without having to deliberate about socially what will happen, what will parents say, what will uncles say, what will my school teachers say. Without worrying about seeking validation, can a person become organically free to express whatever they are feeling, which will make every living creature on earth an artist. An artist will not be a special creed or group by themselves. Every one of us will be an artist because we will be free to express what we feel. Is there a method I can look at in order to create this? I went through a lot of literature, I went through a lot of teachers, I talked to people, and one thing I discovered was that there is a lot of literature beyond what I'm talking about, but more often not, it deals with working with groups. As a group we work, group synergy. As a group we tend to evolve. But for me, the answer lay in the individual. If the individual can bring about this change in themselves, wherein they can become, in a way resilient to seek some sort of resolution. I'm not talking about a solution. Solutions to many of our traumas are not existing, but a resolution, which means that I can objectively now look at it. So if some sort of a resolution can be provided, that would be awesome. Because one, it starts with an individual. Once an individual starts working on themselves, a domino effect can take place and the entire society can undergo a change. Just like if we were to look at, great figures of our history and of our narratives like Gautam Buddha, he walked alone first and then he took disciples. Jesus walked alone first. He worked with himself first. Then he decided to train 12 apostles. Every person we look at in our mythology, in history, in religion, who have brought about a massive change, have started alone. It becomes very important for an individual to start making this change within themselves by looking at themselves, which means an objectivity has to be provided. And what better to provide this objectivity towards liberation than theater? Theater is a craft which is about responding to imaginary stimulus. All the time we are involved in creating illusions of character and enjoying whatever objectives those characters need to pursue. And there we are finding our own salvation through that. Ask any actor and they will always, prefer to play a role which is that of per se a negative character or a so-called bad character or a villain character than to play the goody nice person. Because when we are playing the character of, when we are trying to create delusion of the character of a villain, etc., we tend to use our imagination to respond to imaginary stimulus, things which we will not do in everyday life, but are most important for us to vent out whatever is there within us, for us to seek that sort of an intervention which allows us to free ourselves out of our traumas and nervousness and our anxieties, etc. What is required is a transformation, and theater facilitates this transformation in an organic way. If you remember, I mean, most of us, when we were very young, 6 years, 5 years, etc. At least I remember from my childhood in Delhi that, during Diwali time, around October start, we all used to, before Diwali, we could all play on the terrace, and the game we used to play used to be this of, Tirdan police, cops and robbers. So the whole deal was that you will have these, these cape guns, yeah, and then you have to, there'll be cops, there will be robbers. So the robbers will go up in the terrace, they will hide behind water tanks, somewhere else, and they will have their guns. And now the police will come in with their cape guns. And the deal was, if the gun is pointed at you and it is pressed and it goes bang, you are dead. And whomsoever is left at the end of the game is the winner. Now look at this game. We played this game, in the mid-afternoons when the sun was kind of hot on our head. What were we wearing? We were wearing either our sleeveless banian or some t-shirt and shorts, etc. Most of the kids were dressed in this kind of clothing. And we had these rickety-rackety guns which we had borrowed, begged, stole, or begged our parents to buy us. And when we play this game, what happened to us? When we are hiding behind those water tanks as those robbers, we believed in the truth of the moment that I should not get caught. I didn't believe that I'm a robber, I'm a bad guy, I've stolen something. No, that is all just there as text. What we believed in was I should not get caught. And with that gun, when I'm hiding behind that water tank, I sweat. There is anticipation. There is my heart is beating fast. And as the police car, when I am on the terrace trying to hide these robbers, I'm so careful that I'm not making any sound. I'm so careful that I should not be shot. I'm absolutely aware of each and everything around me. What any Zen master in today's time will define as mindfulness. What gave me this mindfulness? What made me feel so engrossed in the truth of the moment, which came from imagination and allowed me to believe that I should not get caught? Where did I get that exhilaration from? Where did I get that freedom from? It came from the role play of cops and robbers. It came from other role plays also. Then during the Ram Lila times, all of us could take one broken scale and pretend it's a sword, or we would take some, break one branch and tie it with one nada and make it a bow and use irkuchi or something as arrows. Where did this belief in the truth of the moment come from? Where did we endow these everyday properties with so much power that we enjoyed this transformation, which was very, very healing? It gave us a lot of purity and it gave us a lot of happiness in that moment. I feel that that is missing from our lives today. But this was the starting point for me to think of introducing role play in my classroom as a method of developing liberation. Now this role play needed to come from an aspect which is very easily acceptable to all of us. Something which does not try to define any new frontiers or does not try to create any new truth, but it has to be established truth, because that is very important that I'm able to give my participants that comfort. So where else to turn to but mythology? Mythology, which is nothing more than the established truth of some era or a collection of truth of lot of different people. Each one of us can have our own truths, and that creates mythology. So there is no right mythology and wrong mythology. So from mythology, I felt that possibly just try for an exploration. So the first thing to do in this for me was to get my students prepared in order to tackle this. So when I talk about preparing my students in order to tackle this, I came back to my 4 I's. That is intuitiveness, impulsiveness, instinctiveness, and imagination. Now these 3 words, at least the first 3 words, are very close to each other in terms of what they mean. So impulsiveness is nothing more than acting without a forethought. Impulsive behavior is what makes you respond without a forethought. Then what is intuitive behavior? Intuitive behavior becomes nothing more than you believing in the powers of your body to respond without you having to think about it. And instinctive behavior became about responding to things with your body's behavior and not with too much of cerebral thought. Like I said, very close to each other. To understand it simpler, I can say that, if we are riding a bike or a car on the road and suddenly somebody runs across, a cat goes across, a child trips, something happens, you brake. You brake without thinking. You don't think, oh, somebody is crossing, my velocity is this much. If I apply the brakes right now, I will be able to resist from hitting them, hence I should brake. No, you brake without thinking. You do it intuitively, impulsively, instinctively. Now this is the cognitive skill which I felt needs to be revitalized. Not that it is not there. Every one of us knows that when we are sitting and a mosquito suddenly comes like this, without thinking we do this. Especially as a woman, we know when we are walking on the street, even without looking back, we know someone is looking at us in a threatening way, in a weird way. How do we know that? This comes from these cognitive skills of intuition, impulsiveness, and instinctiveness. So I felt, let's look at developing this skill first before I introduce a module which I had created in order for them to explore role play. So this was not very difficult for me, being a stage actor and having been a teacher for so many years. I basically created a list of specific games which could be used by students in order to explore these 4 facets. Many of you, especially those of you who belong to the theater community, might have done many of these games. The only speciality of these games was that they can be done by individuals, because I wanted to focus only on the individual. My firm belief was, if the individual transforms, the space around them will transform. The transforming space will transform everything else around it. I was not ready to place my trust on group transformation, because I felt that as individuals, all of us are different, our needs are different, our disabilities are different, our issues are different. So we need to tackle it individually. So this is a set of games I made. If any one of you is interested, I will be happy to share it with Regin and Thiru, and they can send it across to you also. So once these games I had formulated, I started using these games with my students. Games everybody loves. The word is play. In Hindi we will say khel or nautanki. In Tamil we will say koot. And the funny part is that even when we want to scold somebody, we use this word. In English we might say, stop doing so much of drama, you are a drama queen or a drama king. In Tamil we will say, koot adikya de. In Hindi we will say, kya nautanki macha rakhi hai, tamasha mat dikhao, kya khel rahe ho. And the laughable part is that all these words mean drama. It means theater. So the deal was that let us use play at first to make children once again. I apologize if I keep using the word children again and again. I work with age groups right from 5 to 6 years up to 25, 30 years, sometimes even more. So working with my participants, first, let us get them to start re-looking at their intuitiveness, instinctiveness, impulsiveness abilities which through conditioning and unfortunately education, we have kept on telling them it's not right, it's not wrong. We have taught them things like think before you speak, etc., look before you leap, etc., so that they are always conditioned to follow the path laid down by society to say this is right, this is wrong. This is the path to be followed and everything will be happy and good. If you don't follow this path, there will be issues for you. That is why more or less when most of us want to take theater as a profession or acting as a profession, immediately everyone will be like, no, no, that is not a profession. Take a bank job and do theater as a side job, etc. So once these games started, which ran through almost 8 to 9 sessions, and the students and participants started feeling comfortable with their own physical body and physical voice. See, this became very important to empower them to feel comfortable with their own physical bodies and physical voice, rather than seeking validation on, do I look good, do I sound good, am I handsome, am I pretty, should I be this thin, should I be this muscular. You know, one had to break all these mindsets. So these kind of games allowed us to empower them to enhance their intuitive powers, instinctive powers, impulsive powers, and most importantly, their imagination. Because imagination is that one singular tool which leads us towards self-healing. Imagination is nothing more than us responding to stimuli which we ourselves create in order to self-heal. Let me give you an example of self-healing here. Sometimes in our life, somebody abuses us very badly, screams and shouts at us in a position where we are not able to say anything because they are a superior or they are a peer or something. They do this. And once they have screamed and shouted and abused us, we are going back home. And as we are going back home, what happens in our imagination? In our imagination, we start plotting how we are going to torture these people. We start plotting how we are going to destroy each and every member of their house. We start plotting each and every step of that torture. And by the time we have reached our house, what has happened? Our anger, our humiliation, our feeling insulted has all diminished. It has all reduced. The mind and the body by itself has brought us to a level of calm by self-healing through imagination. We use imagination to put ourselves to sleep. We use imagination to pass time in a very boring maths or a physics or a chemistry class. Imagination is the most important facet us humans have to self-heal ourselves. So to bring imagination in as then the fourth eye became a very important task for me. So once all this was in place, my students were now comfortable with engaging with themselves more than engaging with others. Then they started understanding behavior is more important than what cerebrally they are thinking. When that happened, I introduced my module to them. I introduced a simple method which I had created for them, wherein they could use role play in order to seek this liberation. Now, actors who are working on stage and who have worked for a long time exactly know what I am talking about. But the deal here was to bring it into the safe space where there are no spectators. No spectators, no spectators. There are only these participants. They are not even actors, because we are not looking at performance, clear speech, enunciation, diction, not to fumble, ability to improvise. No, we were only looking at them to enter into this module and slowly start coming face to themselves. So what I mean by that, let me tell you about it. So this is something which I had created so that even teachers in school who may not per se have a drama background would be able to indulge in with a very basic, with a very basic training. 2017 is the time when I had constructed this handbook, and since 2017 I have been working with lots of teachers in various schools in Tamil Nadu and introduced this method to them so that they can use it with their own students, etc. And also in schools in Chennai we have done it, and with lots of students also. We also tied up with Teach for India and went to their schools and worked with their students using these methods. And this is all play, so there is no danger of any of it not working, or there is no danger of any of it becoming boring. So the module, the steps in the module, the first step in the module was the children were inspired to select one mythological character from mythological story which they like. There was no other condition put on it. Good character, bad character, no. And of course, sometimes when we went to a particular school, children may not be so well versed with mythology. They may not be, you know, from my generation where, you know, one grew up listening to stories, reading stories. We live in very different times today. So children were not very familiar with sometimes with this concept of mythology. The first thing we introduced to them were comic books. We gave them comic books which were about myths like Amachitra Kathas and lots of other comic books, and asked them to go through them, enjoy them, read them for 2 or 3 classes were nothing more than children sitting in their own corners, taking a comic book and reading it. Sometimes kids came to us and said, my grandmother has told this story, would this work as mythology? Why I was reiterating on mythology was because mythology affords us to be both subjective and objective. Mythology allows us to talk about some person who is, you know, grander than us, who belongs to a different kind of a space, etc., to have a problem, you know, and look at it from a distance. But at the same time, it allows us the subjectivity to understand that their endeavor and our endeavor in our life is not very different. So we might not be some great prince of some kingdom who is going to, you know, look for some, who's going to go searching for their partner or loved one and they don't know where to go, etc. We may not have this situation in our life at all ever, but we do understand the tragedy of separation. We do understand the desperation of loss. We do understand what it is to be deprived of something. And if we were, and I felt that if we were going to discuss this in realistic terms, it becomes very traumatic. And I am not a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist to, you know, discuss this with children. That's why schools are supposed to have a counselor. No, I wanted to give mythology which actually places the problem away from me, at the same time allowing me a very conducive space in which I can participate in that endeavor. That's all. So they were given these comic books and they were told to read, and we did not, there was no problem with, you know, people reading different sorts of comic books and coming up with their own, you know, thoughts on different kinds of stories. There was no restriction put up in what they can read as long as we were talking about mythology. So we gave this and children started reading this and they picked up something. So for example, there was one child who picked up the story of Mirabai. It was there in an Amachitra Katha format, and this kid read this story. And this kid said that I like the story of Mirabai. So that was lovely. So this was step 1. Step 2 was, we told them, all right, you have read the story, you have figured out this character whom you are going to work with, but more importantly, read it again. Because now, we want you to put the comic down and we want you to tell us the story, that's all. We don't want you to worry about, you know, following the exact words of the comic book or the story book, nothing. In your words, you tell us the story and you can be comfortable with whatever language you want to use. I am not worried about grammatical errors. I am not worried about you talking in any dialect. I am concerned about you only telling me the story. And again, understand, this is a safe space where there are only participants. There are no spectators, no teachers, no students who don't have class to come and sit in and watch this, no school inspectors, principals, no one. It is just the facilitator and the children. So the children take another session or something and they start narrating the story. But first we tell them that before narrating it to all of us, narrate it to just one peer. So we made them fall into groups of 2 or 3 or 4 depending on their numbers. Sometimes in classrooms we deal with very large numbers, 50, 60 students also. Then we need to break them into a slightly larger group. So we break them into these groups and we said, now you tell your stories to each other. So they will sometimes say like, you know, okay, I'm not very sure about my story. And I'll tell them, don't worry about what you have read. You just tell it in your own words, whatever you have understood. And if you still have a problem telling a story, let me tell you that all of us are beautiful storytellers because all of us love to gossip. And gossip is a medium through which information actually spread at one time in history. Gossip was actually a medium through which we possibly even developed storytelling. So I said, we all gossip, right? We all gossip during lunchtime, we gossip in class, we gossip here and there. Now gossip with your 3 peers or 2 peers and tell them your story. So they spend another class or something. When I say class, I usually mean around 75 minutes. That's how long my sessions usually are in schools. So they once again sit down in their peer groups, and then they are telling their stories in their own words. Sometimes they can get names wrong. It's perfectly okay. Doesn't matter. We are not trying to create Bhagavatars or storytellers here. We are only trying to make these children start using their articulation skill in order to share. And when they articulate their story, it creates a lot of empowerment for them. All of us love to participate in storytelling. All of us gossip because it gives us a lot of freedom in many senses. So they start telling these stories as the second step. Once they become comfortable with telling each other the story, the third step, we put them in front of their other participants. So there is no front audience actor. No, it is the usual theater circle. Sometimes people ask, why a circle? Why not a square? Or why not a rectangle? Why do we always make a circle? A circle is always democratic. That's why our parliament is also circular. Circle means there are, even King Arthur's round table was circular. It meant all of us are equal. We sit at the same level. All of us have the right to talk to each other without there being any hierarchy. And during our cluster period, after the hunting, when we came back, we sat in a circle around the fire because that was the only way to receive equal warmth and to make sure that nobody stole away the best part of the meat, So we could all look at the meat being cooked, and we sat in a circle to receive equal warmth. Same way in our class, we put them in a circle, and each one of them started articulating the story that they had read. Sometimes there is reticence. They are not able to tell the story. Sometimes they are like, you tell the story, or I don't want to tell the story. Perfectly okay. We can even spend 2 to 3 to 4 sessions on the storytelling until and unless each and every child or participant in that circle has told the story. Once that step was cleared, the next step became a little more engrossing step. In this step, they were told. Of course, when I'm talking, this particular module is something which was used for children above 6th class. Below 6th class, this particular module was not used. Something separate was created for them because this required a particular age responsibility. So once they had done this, now the question which was asked to them was, okay, you have told us the story. Now can you do a simple thing? These stories were between 4 to 6 minutes. That's all they were given the time to narrate their stories. Now they were told, you need to break up your story and let us all know what are the various conflicts that your character faced in the story. So when we told them that we asked them this question, what are the various conflicts that they face in this story, they make a list of it. Sometimes they don't understand what is a conflict. So then we also explain to them, a conflict would basically mean that there is something which you want from someone and that someone does not want to give it to you. As simple as that, that's conflict. And conflict, we all know, is at the core center of all good theater and good cinema. Conflict is what creates drama. So we explained to them what a conflict is and we said list it out. So they will sit and they create a list of conflicts. So this kid who had taken up the story of Mirabai, this kid made a list of the conflicts that Mirabai does not want to marry someone because she feels she is married to this stone, this wooden idol she has. Like that she made a list. Mirabai does not want to worship the other god, she wants to worship this god. Like that she makes a whole list. Once this list of conflict has been created by the participant, the next step in this module was, they were asked, what does the situation mean to you? Not in realistic terms, not in terms of what has really happened to you in your life. Like for example, if this child has picked up this conflict that Mirabai is trying to resist getting married because she believes she is already married, and now this kid is being asked what it means to you. This is not to find a substitute in your real life that this is what happened to me in real life. No, we clearly stay away from what has happened in natural life. We are talking only here about imagination. As long as it's imagination, it's objective, it will not trouble us. So they will say, what would the situation mean to you? You know, in your imagination. So the kid comes up with something. This situation to me is like my mother, could be like my mother saying, do this when I don't want to do that, or my father saying, do this and I don't want to do that, or my school teacher asking me to complete a task which I tell her I've already done. So they get into their imagination and create small, small incidents which are akin to what they have selected as their character's conflict. So they make a list of it. I know I'm rushing this part in this webinar right now. This will go through at least 3 to 4 sessions in the class for them to understand what conflict means, and then to understand, to segregate these conflicts, and then to select conflicts from their real life, which are imaginary but placed with real people, mother, father, friend, real people but imaginary situations. So they create these conflicts, and when it is imaginary, it makes it that much more fun to indulge in it. Like all of us know in our imagination all the things that we do to each other, what others do to us, we all know about it. You know, the kind of healing processes, love processes, any other emotional content process we are all able to go through using our imagination. These children do the same, except they are led by the conflict of what they have put down for their character. And they create a list of these conflicts. Once they have created a list of these conflicts, so they have the character's conflict. So, for example, let me read one from an session which took place in a classroom. So, so this child has, the same one, Mirabai. One conflict list she has done is that Mirabai has been told in her childhood that the effigy of Lord Krishna is her husband, and she has lived her entire childhood believing that. Now she is going to be married to a king. How can she have 2 husbands? Should she agree to this new alliance she is being forced into? And this kid creates a one-liner to understand this. This is basically to rectify a confusion. Who is my husband? And that is the objective or the conflict that this character is facing. Now, the student who is basically taken up this conflict creates an situation, an as-if situation. This situation to me is as if ... In their imagination, they create a situation. This particular participant has given one, has chosen something which they have created as their imaginary situation. I'm not reading the particular one this student has chosen, but what I would say is I would kind of encourage all of you to come up with one for yourself right now. The character's conflict is where she or he has to rectify a situation to figure out who is the real husband. What does this mean to us in our own life? This situation to me is as if, have I ever been, in my imagination, am I being, is it possible for someone to suspect me of doing something? Is it possible for someone to accuse me of something? I create something in my imagination and I write it down. Like that, this kid creates for a lot of conflicts, and for each conflict, this participant creates something from their own life, which is from imagination. When I say own life, it only means the people in that imagination are real people. So once this list has been created by this participant, they go through it for themselves. This is not shared with anyone else. You know, sometimes they can share it with the facilitator if that sort of a trust has been set up in the class, wherein the facilitator reads their as if imaginary situation and possibly tells them if they are going offline somewhere, and tells them, encourages them to possibly use their imagination a little more. They create this line. Once this line has been created, now the participants are told, once again narrate your story, but this time when you are narrating your story, wherever conflicts occur in this story of yours, we want you to focus on the conflict which you have created, which you yourself created. So when you yourself created these conflicts in your own life, how are you going to rectify them? So if somebody has accused you of something, how will you rectify it? Your rectification is going to be by, are you going to beg somebody's forgiveness? Are you going to challenge somebody's hierarchy? Are you going to negate somebody's presence? Are you going to seduce somebody? Are you going to love somebody? So we encourage them to think of actions. When I say action, I don't mean physical body moving. I mean actions in terms of sayal. If I use the Tamil varthai, sayal. Think in terms of actions. So the child, where they have the conflict of their character, where they have the conflict derived from their imagination, with each conflict, they actually create a list of action words. I hate you, I urge you, I love you, I demean you, I tease you, whatever works, with that conflict, they make this list. And their final, not their final, their one before final session is when they narrate the story, in this case of Mirabai, in their mind, the conflicts which are there are now which they have placed from their imagination, and the actions they play when they are telling the story have been inspired by the conflicts they created. So when they tell the story of Mirabai, they actually are now embarking on a journey wherein they are becoming objective about conflicts of their own everyday life and playing actual actions out there which allows them to go towards a resolution, not find a solution, go towards a resolution. If with my participants I am able to reach till this point comfortably and being able to work with this, work on this with them, and if my time and resources permit, my final session is when I tell them, all right, we have done this much, let's go for some external work also. Let's select some sort of a costume which you think might work. Again, this is not about being period right. It is not about, buying something new or making something new. No. Okay, you want to play the character of Mirabai, just see if you can beg, borrow, steal, or if you have a Ghagra Choli. Or if you are playing the character of, Veerapandya Kattabomman, bring one vesti, I will tie the, the katham for you. Or we teach them, whichever way. And then, if we can do that, then it brings even more objectivity to the participant. So along with their text which they have created, this kind of an external allows them with complete objectivity to enjoy storytelling in a safe place with the participants who belong to their group. There are no spectators. I don't have a performance pressure. I don't have to, I am not being video recorded. Nobody is sitting there and clapping and saying, Vasanam romba alaga sonna. All that is not allowed. We just stand up and we do this performance for each other. And when we do that, we indulge in role play. Role play is nothing more than playing a role, which is done by using internal aspects of characterization and external aspects of characterization. But we don't need to go into these details with our participants. We just empower them to get into the dynamics of this module wherein they start telling stories. What happens in a therapy session when we go to a counselor or a psychiatrist, or, I mean not a psychiatrist, but a psychologist? What happens? We end up telling stories. What happens when you feel very down, you feel, really negative? You reach out for your best friend and I want to talk to you. You want to talk. We talk. We talk to each other in order to seek resolution. But today in a social order where we have completely lost these cognitive skills of intuitiveness, instinctiveness, imagination, and impulsiveness, and have kind of, relegated ourselves to, conditioned ourselves to only follow rules, regulations, right, wrong, moral, sin, purity, etc., all these binaries, it becomes very difficult for anyone to get some sort of a resolution. Anxieties, nervousness, depressions, traumas, we are living with them rather than trying to find some sort of resolution. And if we don't tackle them at a young age, what happens after we, have matured, grown up? We inadvertently even, get married, find partners. We start families. And all of these traumas start burdening the people who are around us. Our so-called loved ones start getting burdened by this. Society ends up calling us either antisocial or says that kind of a person is not okay. So where does this intervention need to be provided? It needs to be provided at a young age. So I love to work with children who are possibly in 6th, 7th class, around the time also they will be undergoing their hormonal changes. It becomes a very important time to facilitate them with the powers of articulation, both physical and vocal, to give them this power of articulation, to empower them to be able to say no when they want to say no, yes when they want to say yes, and understand that they owe their first responsibilities to themselves, not to God, not to Guru, not to guest, not to teacher, no one. First, you owe your responsibility to yourself. And when they understand that, then they can start articulating whatever they feel, when they can be intuitive about what's around them, when they can respond to behavior than words. Mother says, uncle is a very nice man, he's my brother, today you spend one day in his house, and you are like, oh, mother is saying uncle can't be a bad man at all, but your entire intuitiveness saying no, 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 stay away. What do? Are we intuitive? No. Because we have been taught we are not supposed to be intuitive. We have been taught we are supposed to believe what mother says can never be wrong. Uncles will always be good people. In order to allow ourselves to respond to behavior, in order to allow ourselves to be intuitive, impulsive, instinctive, allow our imagination to grow beyond our own thought. I'm sure all of you know Albert Einstein said, imagination any day is far more important than knowledge. I may be paraphrasing it, but that's the gist of what he basically said. To allow us to become imaginative is going to lead to an empowered individual. An empowered individual will lead to an empowered space. Empowered space will allow more people to enter it to seek empowerment. Hence, we will be looking at a far more holistically happy and healthy society if each and every individual is able to gather up their resilience in order to empower themselves to be liberated. Liberation is about understanding who we are, accepting all that we are, and giving articulation to whatever we are able to feel. So this was basically the thought process concept with which in 2017 I created a handbook. This is basically the handbook, and if anyone wishes to read it, also I'm very happy to share it with you. This is by no way a process which is wrapped up. 2017 this started. It is still going on, and this project by itself has also become a living document that it keeps on undergoing changes. As I meet people, I talk to other facilitators, teachers, moderators. It keeps on undergoing new changes. It keeps on getting more additions in terms of the diversity of our communities and societies. And I'm very happy when also people add to this and talk about how, possibly I am missing certain things, and we can collaborate and make it something bigger, wider, more effective in that sense. Always open to all of that. So in order to use the theater necessities, I call the necessities of theater to be, for an actor, is to be impulsive, intuitive, instinctive, and imaginative, and to apply that through the process of role play in order to seek liberation is a quest on which I am working for some years now. Before 2017, I was working on it without having some kind of a codification. Post 2017, once I made this handbook, I am working with a particular guideline with teachers and students. So that is the process. It's going on, and yeah, that's it. And yeah, I'm done with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bala sir. So to spend more than 1 hour with us, friends, please drop your questions in chat box. So I will read the questions for you, sir.
Sure, Rajin.
Okay. So there is a question from Lakshmi Palaniappan. What are some literatures or books that you have read for research that you would recommend us?
Okay, okay. I have my bibliography itself here, so I can just read books out there. I read David Mamet's True and False: Heresy and Common Sense for the Actor. I read David Mamet's Theater. I read David Mamet's Three Uses of the Knife on the Nature and Purpose of Drama. I read Augusto Boal's Games for Actors and Non-Actors. But the book by Augusto Boal, which really hit close to heart, was the book called Rainbow of Desire. And that is a book in which Augusto Boal also talks about the individual. So that became a very valuable resource for me. I also read Claude Lévi-Strauss's book Myth and Meaning, and then Michael Rhodes' Theater for Community, Conflict and Dialogue, and then the book called A Practical Handbook for the Actor, which is by 6 different writers, Melissa Bruder, Michael Lee Cohen, and some more. And then I read the book Acting Out, the Workbook, a guide to the development and presentation of issue-oriented audience interactive improvisational theater. This is by Ember Mario Costa and Sally S. Fishman, if I'm getting the pronunciation right. And then I read Viola Spolin's Improvisation for the Theater, Viola Spolin's Theater Games for Rehearsal, and Viola Spolin's Theater Games for the Lone Actor. Because as I said, I was focusing a lot on the individuals in that sense. Yeah, these are some of the books I read. Also, I had a talk with some people who were involved with working in conflict zones and community theater. So those interviews also have gone towards the creation of this one.
Thank you, sir. Mange ma'am, do you want to add something? So, with your permission, sir. Yeah. Ma'am, you might. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Bala, for a great morning. And I mean, you know how much respect I have for your work, and I'm really, it's amazing to see it falling in place, you know, with a framework. Would really love to look at your workbook and all that. I just want to add for the benefit of the listeners, because in your practice, I also know you take these into account. What I really thought was, you know, I mean, what you're saying works very well in a formal educational system. The younger the children, and you can work better. But what the issues that we are facing are systemic issues, because even when the child joins a school, I know of a school in Chennai where a 4th class student said, "Naangallam thappa thodakudadu," you know. Or we are talking about a school where probably their stories are about Khatija, you know, and not necessarily about Sita, or about, let's say, the goddess Mariamma, you know. So in an uneven system, while you're focusing on the individual and strengthening their impulse, intuition, imagination, like you said, which are brilliant, I think the teachers or the facilitators should also be a little more sensitive to all these inequities and inequalities which are built in, you know, because each one tries to cope. Like you said, it's not even for a production. It is just for unleashing your own individual sense of freedom and liberation. So it has to be grounded in their own experience, you know, without creating much more confusion, you know, because if you're going to take the examples of, let's say, Rama and not Karna, for example, even within the myths, then I think many children cannot afford to be Ramas. You know, I may want to be, you know, I'm not even getting into the politics of Rama. So I'm just, I mean, I just want this whole framework to have a little more caution, which I know you do in your practice. You know, I'm aware that you deal with Greek myths, you know, you deal with a lot of unspoken areas, and I see a lot of members from your group really taking on a lot of work. So, you know, it's not just about Bala, the person. I'm also thinking of it as a pedagogy that you are trying to introduce. So with all great regards, I just want to add that caveat, because I thought in your presentation that was not stressed upon, because this individual that you're talking about does not exist in a vacuum. And in reality, we have an uneven system.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Bala.
Absolutely. Thank you, ma'am. Absolutely. I mean, Mangai ma'am is absolutely right there when we're talking about equity and that not being a system where we can look at people equally. One thing for me is that, I mean, I may have given some examples today which might seem to have come from a particular mythological set or component, but we don't ever tell children what is the kind of myths they have to read, or specifically only carry Mahabharata or Ramayana for the children. We are trying to explore and expose them to as many myths we can get our own hands on in that sense. And many schools, when we work with different children, bring different mythology. So there are schools where Ramayana Mahabharata is absolutely not even taken up, but there are very different stories, whether it be the story of Matangi or whether it be the story of some other myth, etc. Sometimes the myth is it comes out in a way that one is absolutely bamboozled. One has never heard of that concept of that myth at all. But the child brings it, that's perfectly okay. Because end of the day, more than the myth by itself, one is only looking at what is the kind of endeavor the child is able to associate with of the character that they have taken. But absolutely I agree that even as facilitators, we need to enhance our own cache of stories, mythology, etc. And as theater actors, we try to endeavor to do that all the time, and I think we should enhance it much in a much more grander sense. And in terms of the individual not existing in a vacuum somewhere, I agree that the individual belongs to individual belongs to the system, to the group, to the space. But somewhere my personal beliefs still lie with the fact that even within the congregation or the community or the communion where people exist, if the individual starts on this process of becoming objective about themselves, that will radiate, that will be the domino effect. Yes, there always is also the perspective that there are not just one, but there are three circles. In the sense, the individual is for me the strongest circle who is being worked with, but there is a circle around the individual also, which is the space in which they are present right now. That also is taken into consideration. And finally, the larger space to which they belong, whether it be in community project, whether it be a school project, or whether it be working with a particular specific group. In that sense, the perspectives of not just the individual, but the whole is there in the gamut, but the individual is the person who is being targeted and trying to radiate across through that. And in terms of teachers becoming more empathetic, in terms of teachers becoming more aware, etc., it is such a valid point. But right now, I think the point from the space from where I am working is, I am trying to be that person. I am trying to be that person who is able to understand the requirements, the necessities, understand the truth of what is happening, and for the people working with me, entering into a dialogue with them, so that all of us, when we stand as facilitators with participants, we come from a space wherein we are well aware of the absolute non-existence of the concept of equity and equality. So for me, again, it is starting from the individual me, and the belief and the hope that when it starts working, it will also expand. Like I said, the onset, not only participants, students, children we are working with, we are using the same module with teachers also, so that teachers, once they become kind of acquainted with what we are talking about, might deem it okay to take some aspects of the entire thing into their own classrooms also. Thank you, Mangai ma'am, for those observations.
Thank you so much, sir. And Prasad Brahma, we have one thing. He's saying that I'm not I'm still not clear about imaginative stimulus. Please, can you clarify?
Yes, yes, Mr. Prasad, Brahma. When I'm talking about imaginary stimulus, it's a concept of acting basically. Like in real life, if you look at our responses to things, they are always responses to things which are around us, which are real. They are acting upon us and we are responding to them, and we are living. So that is responding to real stimulus. But when we are on stage or we are in front of a camera, what we are responding to is an imaginary stimulus. So which means that my wheel is not stuck in the ground. So my wheel is not stuck in the ground. It's an imaginary stimulus to which I am responding. So I have not hit the eye of the fish. It is an imaginary stimulus to which I am responding. So I have not been arrested by the police, and the police is not trying to break me to reveal where my comrades are hidden. All these become imaginary stimulus to which the actor responds in an honest, truthful and organic way. So responding to an imaginary stimulus is actually the basic definition of acting.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And there is a question from Chetana. How you would bring in the wisdom of discretion in children? Balance between respect towards elders, also trust the experience of elders, and also listening to their own voice.
Yeah. Thanks for that very important question, Chetana. As far as I believe, I don't think it is my prerogative to tell the children to seek a balance. I think my prerogative is to find the child a safe space. My prerogative is to allow the child to explore their own intuitiveness, behavior, etc. And they will figure out and realize who are the people they should behave with respect, if I use the word, and who are the people who don't deserve their respect. If you were to take a child who is less than 2 years, we don't teach that. We don't need to teach that. Let's hope that we have not started teaching that child Namaskaram Pannu, Jai Pannu and all those things. If you look at a child who is that young, the way they respond to people is purely intuitive. They go and clutch somebody, they clutch somebody's leg, they want to nuzzle against somebody, and some people they will scream and shout. It is because the behavior of that other person, or in terms of sensory perception, they are not comfortable. We need to respect that. If a child is not feeling comfortable in the hand of a grandparent and it's crying, take the child away. If we are not supposed to thrust it into the child. No, this is a grandparent, you better feel happy about it. I think the problem comes in wherein we are placing a lot of baggage on ourselves that we are expected to teach right and wrong. That's my whole problem. The point at which we are defining this right and wrong binary, the child is no longer being able to intuitive. A child left on its own learns these things. They learn whom to trust, and that's inbuilt. Every one of us has this thing inbuilt in our DNA to save ourselves, to keep ourselves away from danger, to make sure nothing wrong happens to us. We have this survival skill, and we are all in that sense praised, right? Our eyes are in front of our, they are not at the side like praise have. We are predators. That's why we have eyes in our front. We all know the survival skills. What we need is safe space. What we need is for us to understand that in this space you are safe. You have to explore things. They will get experiences. Their behaviors will be formed by it. And we need to make sure we are giving good experience to the child. When I say good experience, I mean in terms of what the child is seeing, what the child is listening to, what the child is tasting. These things will add to the child's sensitivity. It will take its own decisions in terms of what is right and what is wrong. Yes, after a few years, it will start conforming. Teacher comes into classroom, it will say good morning like a lost sheep. It will be taught to say good evening, good night and all that. True. That will all have happened by itself. But in order for the child to be able to take its own decisions and protect itself, we provide the safe space. We provide the good experience. We don't have to give them any sort of advice or tattvam in that sense. The child will pick it up by themselves. That is human instinct.
Thank you so much, sir. And there is a question from Srishti Uniting Culture and Society. There are times when children are asked at home by parents about what they did, and then they are influenced by parents in a very different path, similar to how the society forms norms on us. Later, students come and behave as they are being told by parents. Did this happen to you too, sir, ever? And how did you come out of it or avoid it?
I think here we are talking about conditioning and how we get conditioned in order to behave in particular ways. Did this happen to me also? I really have to think back because now I am 47 years old, so I really will have to think back to, when I was 3 years or 4 years old during my formative years. So I'm not able to give you an honest response, Srishti Uniting Culture and Society. Let me think about it and possibly get back to you through Regin or Thiru in terms of, how this kind of a conditioning is something which is going to be, which we will, how can we tackle it? But I think what we can agree upon here is that the word influence, it's important that parents don't influence their children, but give them experiences. A parent need not have to tell a child that you have to exercise every day. If the parent is exercising on their own every day, if the parent is in the habit of, going for a morning walk or something, the child will by itself understand that experience to be good or bad and take it up. But to be told it's good for your health, the more we are told to do something, it's human nature, we will resist it. And the more the child keeps on resisting it, there is going to be more of, in terms of tension that you are a badly behaved child. So in terms of whether I was conditioned in that way and whether I managed to avoid it is something I will have to get back. I don't honestly remember, but I can tell you I come from a joint family where there were like 13, 14 members in the house. So maybe parents did not have that much of time to individually influence, each and every child in that sense. And we were left quite free to do what we want, as long as we are not, going out of our safe space. That's all I can think right now.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'll try to get back.
Thank you so much, sir. And there is a question from Google Priyan. Can you share an example of a child telling a story of an imaginary character in myth using real names of those in child's life and its role in the process of moving towards resolution of the conflict?
Yeah. Gokul, the child will never use real names. The child will always be telling the story only of Meera, as I was reading out to you from the one example which I had recorded. The child will always be using only the names in the myth. That is the most important thing. We will not make the child talk about his real life experiences, even if it is imaginary, because we are not psychologists, we are not counselors, we are only theater facilitators. We are not in a position to handle that kind of a trigger. If that kind of a trigger leads to some kind of traumatic experience, we are not in a position to handle it. No. The child will only be telling the story of Mirabai, and the child will be creating those as-if situations for themselves. And that is something that they have written down for themselves. And then they share the story only of Mirabai. So whatever in terms of imagination they have created, this situation to me is as if my parents refusing to take me out on my birthday or something is something they write for themselves. Something which is already there within them, it stays still with them. But when they indulge in the storytelling exercise of this mythological character with certain externalities, what happens is that there is a certain liberation in terms of them actually coming face to face with the certain conflicts which they have possibly kept within themselves. Maybe then their anxiety or nervousness is addressed in a particular way. With some people it has been like a blast and they have been like, they have had some kind of a revelation and they have felt empowered. For some it has taken years, even before the power of articulation has managed, they have managed to bring out. But once they have brought it out, the process is lifelong for them to just keep going on and discovering who they are, what they want, etc. So it is not, the real situation is never talked about, ever. Not unless one of us is a counselor or a psychologist actually discussing a real life thing. We don't do that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bala sir. So we are ending the session here. And before I say thanks, so if you want to say anything, few words, so you can say, sir.
Very much for all of you for having participated in today's session. I'm very glad that this application of drama techniques webinar has been organized, and some lovely speakers have been there, and I hope you are all enjoying it. And thank you so much, Regin and Teru, and all the organizers. And I wish all of us the very best of luck in our quest for a happy, holistic, equitable society. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bala sir. It's a great pleasure to listen to you all this time. So thanks for your time and experience to share with us. And thanks all the coordinators and organizers and organizations and all the participants. So we will meet tomorrow at 10 o'clock with a different speaker and with a different topic. Monday.
Not tomorrow. Yeah.
No, tomorrow we have, right? So let me check. Okay, let me check in the schedule. Yeah, okay. So you'll be informing through the WhatsApp group and individual. So thank you so much for this wonderful participation. Yeah, thank you, sir, and thank you, everyone. And have a nice day and stay safe. See you the next session. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Please take care.